Welcome, everybody. It's Wednesday, May 1st, the first day of May. And this is the Texas Grassroots Alliance live stream. I'm Alexander Montalvo with the Gap Network. And with me is
Neil Aquino with the Houston Democracy Project and the John Cornyn Houston office protest. Alex, if we were older, I'm older than you, we'd be talking about May Day, right? There's a whole leftist culture and labor culture that would, and not one I'm sympathetic to, but never really been steeped in.
Yeah, absolutely. This would be a great day to talk about that. But we are unfortunately going to be talking about something that is continuing to show itself within our local communities, and that is the threat of authoritarianism.
Well, we'll take your red shirt as a May Day, a tribute to May Day, and an International Workers' Day.
Serendipity happens when it happens,
right.
And you just got to accept it, right?
That's right.
All right, so Neil, talk to us about what is the latest developments you've been seeing around this threat of authoritarianism.
So I watch. So today we're just talk about that we need to be able to talk about the full scope of what's going on. So I watch Houston City Council meetings on HTV. It's on your public access. They broadcast a lot through Facebook. They have an app. I find the app a little difficult to use, but HTV, Houston TV, and they broadcast Houston City Council committee meetings, public sessions on Tuesday of the people, and the agenda, the actual business of the city on Wednesdays. And yesterday, they were some people came from the Texas Gulf Coast AFL-CIO, from the Texas Organizing Project, which is a local, I think they're in San Antonio too, aren't they? And in other places, progressive organizing network or entity, and some of the local nonprofits. And some of it actually was connected to Workers' Memorial Day and workplace deaths, and no water breaks allowed so there was a worker theme. But the gist of the conversation of these witnesses, all good people and some rank and file people, a woman whom had said at one point she had been undocumented, was no longer, was that the city of Houston should have a specific policy directing the Houston Police Department on how it ought to implement SB 4. So SB 4 is yet another one of these show me your papers bills. It's going to the Supreme Court, where at this point you don't know how anything will go anymore. And it would allow law enforcement agents anywhere in the state to see if you are undocumented, and this could pertain, of course, to people across every ethnicity in our great state, but can also be used for profiling of people. So anywhere you are, from the Panhandle to the border to the ocean to El Paso, and rural, suburban, you can be targeted for this. And a routine traffic stop can end up being a deportation or a profiling. And these advocates wanted that HPD have a specific policy that we will not enforce this. Now, in the past, Mayor Turner, our previous mayor, Mayor Whitmire, said we will not enforce this. So we bash Mayor Whitmire a lot, and you can never bash Mayor Whitmire sufficiently. On the other hand, he voted against SB 4, and I believe he is sincere. I do not believe he wishes to round people up. I do not believe that he does. And also, the state of Texas has banned sanctuary cities. But so what happens is the state kind of winks and nods a little bit, because police unions don't seem eager necessarily to do it either. And so then they, and I'm not a fan of police unions, but they probably have other fish to fry. And so they want HPD to make a specific policy. But as Mayor Whitmire said, he didn't seem to be rushing towards that. The chief has said, no, we're not going to enforce this. But the mayor said, okay, this isn't going to be constitutional. And he kind of hedged. He's been saying that for a while. He kind of hedged because he said, well, it's going to the Supreme Court. And he knows that it might, He knows you don't know anymore. He said, how are they going to do it? This isn't feasible. There's so many people. So one lady testifying said, this is, secondhand, this is what this person said. There are 500,000 undocumented people in the area. I don't know if she meant the city. That seems too high for the city, but the county, there's a lot of folks, and it would be real disruption. They are in, these folks, they are working. We see them every day. They are our fellow workers, fellow Houstonians. They are right in our communities. Multiple ethnicities. And he's like, how's this going to happen? This isn't practical. So, with all due respect to these good people who are coming, here's how it'll happen. Donald Trump is telling you out loud how it'll happen. He is saying, I will be elected, and he leads in the polls, leads in just about every electoral college poll. I will be elected. I will build camps. I will use the National Guard. I will invoke the power of local police. That's how it'll happen, right? We were like, oh, this is unthinkable, right? Think of all the things. Oh, it's unthinkable. It's unthinkable that we'll have this rapist, traitorous president who foments January 6th and is back, right? That's how it'll happen. He'll fucking do it.
Yeah, it was either last month or in March where we had a live stream where we shared the reporting of Lone Star Left and PBS,
right,
talking about, this whole infrastructure of being able to round up folks, and that their plans and their game plan, and this is connected to Project 2025 that some folks may have been hearing about. So
right,
when we have local government, a local mayor, that's the mayor of a city like Houston, which is massive.
It's big.
Try to talk about they don't see how this is going to happen, and is almost reluctant to give it any kind of credence or any kind of legitimacy. Yet you have president saying exactly how they're going to do it.
Right.
That shows that there's a huge disconnect, Neil. And my curiosity is, as you're watching this and you're hearing from these people talk about this, and you're hearing the mayor, like, what is that to you? Why is it that there's this disconnect? Why do you think that this disconnect is happening?
Right. And one or two of these ideas may be supplemented by things we said in our pre-conversation. So for one thing, Mayor Whitmire had been in the Senate for 5 decades, if you can imagine, the legislature, 4 decades or so in the Senate. So he has sat with these people. He's like, oh, how can this shit happen? Well, dude, you've been sitting with the people who would do it. And so you have maybe a man who doesn't believe in these things, and he's dedicated his life to systems that are producing these outcomes. So maybe he doesn't want to acknowledge it. There are 6 Republican members of Houston City Council. Okay. I'm not cognizant of any of them who have publicly disassociated themselves from Donald Trump. Now, the adage is there's no Republican or Democratic way to fill a pothole, but you don't need authoritarians filling the pothole. There are plenty of people who don't support a rapist traitor for president who could fill the damn pothole. Okay. And so they want to I understand the business of the city has to continue, and there are portions of the city that are Republican, but they don't want to acknowledge that the 6 people sitting with them. Okay, but the history books are filled with co-workers and neighbors who committed brutal and cruel acts while they're sitting next to you smiling at you. Okay, then also it's an indictment of the full system. So you don't navigate these systems successfully enough to become a Houston City Council member or any elected official, even a smaller place. You don't navigate these systems to then say, hey, this system that I have successfully navigated through sycophancy, raising money, my intelligence, my skills, my time, all sorts of good and bad skills. You don't navigate these systems to say, oh, they're rounding everybody up. It's an admission of failure. Then there's the admission. Then there is, well, if this is true, boy, it's like the Alien movies, right? If this is true, that people are, when they come to Earth, people are going to be riled up, and so. I think Jodie Foster, the aliens came and people started having, hey, you're told a super disturbing fact.
For our audience, that film is Contact, directed by Robert Zemeckis in the mid-90s.
Right.
This is a 30-year callback Neil is making.
It is. The theater I saw that in Cincinnati has been torn down even. That's how old it is. And, but you hear a disturbing fact, you've placed your faith, so you're afraid how the people will respond. It's disturbing, and it is disruptive. And will there be disruption? And how will we conduct the day-to-day business of the city? And so you have, you don't want that cancer diagnosis. That's disruptive to every plan you've got.
Right.
You're like, how can that shit be true? I got to go do this, right? And you have facts out there. You have a guy that is telling you, if I lose, there'll be a bloodbath and violence, and if I win, I'll be a dictator and you have the person next to you, your councilman, your co-worker, your uncle, your aunt, your car mechanic, your person sitting next to you in the pew. Yep. So this may seem 101. We're talking about Texas organizing, but we have to just grasp this stuff is here, and we have to compel our elected officials and our organizing nonprofits who are so often connected to the stability in the system that electeds use for their own power and access, even when they're very good people. We have to acknowledge this stuff is here.
I think there's a big issue with us not calling out the way people are compromised as a way of them avoiding to challenge the system, right? And I think we see this in a number of ways. So our institutions are showing us that they are either weakened, ineffective, or corrupt.
Right.
And
it must be maintained by force.
Right. And as people are challenging these systems, regardless of what the political spectrum is, there's a clear threat from the far right that is in favor of authoritarianism that harms all of us if this gets implemented to the degree that they want.
Correct.
We're being told that to resist this authoritarianism from the far right, we need to align ourselves with more democratic and liberal representation.
Sure.
So that we can stop this threat on democracy, and we can stop this threat of fascism, right, is what gets termed a lot. But if local democratic elected officials, the political to challenge the collective that they're in, whether it's city council, whether it's the commissioner's court, or even the state legislature, which is already pretty massive, right?
Right.
We're hearing it from the national players that this threat is real, from national politicians, national elected officials, national media. They are all talking about this. But locally, if we have Democratic representation versus Republican representation, but the Democrats themselves will not speak to this issue legitimately, this is a problem for all of us, that they are not speaking about this in a clear, honest, and forceful way around this threat of authoritarianism. And I think from progressive grassroots organizers, this is what we hear from grassroots organizers on the ground, what is so frustrating, that the Democratic Party has different forms of representation in terms of ideological, policy perspectives from more conservative leaning members to more progressive leaning members. And it feels like there is a really big issue with the conservative members of the Democratic Party that feel more of a motivation and priority to keep their relationships with Republican
Correct.
conservative elected officials and infrastructure than protecting the people.
Right.
When the people are at threat of this authoritarianism that has already shown itself with the ISD school takeover,
Right.
amount of students, parents, and teachers that have been deeply affected because of the HISD takeover. We've seen it at the border communities
Eagle
with what's
Pass doesn't
happening
want
there.
that shit there. The people of Eagle Pass want them out of the damn park.
Absolutely. We've seen it in so many other ways in how this is showing up in Texas, and efforts that are serving the community in El Paso being struck down by Ken
That's
Paxton,
right.
being challenged in the court, right?
Faith-based
Faith-based communities,
immigrant
right?
help.
In Tarrant County, we did a whole session about O'Hare and what is happening with the Tarrant County Commissioner's Court,
Right.
and on and on and on. And when folks who are elected as Democrats are unable to speak to these threats honestly with the public, and instead is trying to curry relationships and favor within their institutions, which are either failing, incompetent, or corrupt, then this is where we start to get the people feeling like they can't trust what is going to happen, and they don't know what's going to happen.
I sent a letter on part of my Houston Democracy Project. I sent a letter about 2 weeks ago individually to each of the 10 council Democrats in Houston, and then a joint letter to the 6 Republicans saying, why is the chair of our Public Safety Committee, Republican Amy Peck, who I remember when she campaigned and won the seat, campaigned with, I remember with Trump supporters. So here's the Public Safety Committee. We're facing an authoritarian threat. The police unions support election deniers. So do the damn fire unions, as they summon the banner of labor here locally. Support election deniers. So the Public Safety Committee in this majority Democratic city, it's nonpartisan. What bullshit. So 4 of the 6 members of the Public Safety Committee, the chair, Amy Peck, Julian Ramirez, Nan Huffman, and I'm sorry, the 4th member of the 4th, I think it's Mr. Davis. Whomever it is, it's the 4th member. It's 4-2 on the Public Safety Committee. So those folks went yesterday, and we trust these folks. Okay, these are all good folks who testified yesterday, but we trust you to get the shit right. And it's entirely conceivable that if Mayor Whitmire, or let's say they want to do a process, and Mayor Whitmire continues to emphasize that things, as he dilutes our Proposition A, which we're supposed to expand democracy, set up a whole different issue. But he talks about committees. So this would go to committee, theoretically. Okay, well, the committee is 4-2 Republican. So would it get out of the damn committee? Or would it be watered down in committee? That HPD have a specific policy to deal with SB4. That was the ask for folks who weren't with us at the beginning. That was the ask from labor and these organizers. Okay, but there was no reference to the makeup to the committee, and yet it's in front of you. And I sent this letter to each of my. I received a half reply from someone, which was a little bit incoherent. Actually, ironically, from the most conservative of the 10 Democrats, Ed Pollard, and none of them reply. Right? They know who I am. I don't frequently go down to council. I don't really even have that many interactions with them. So, they may or may not, I don't know. No reply. And, Amy Peck, the chair, as I looked up her biography, she did, I think she may have a psychology degree and assisted PTSD veterans. She might be a great person. Okay. It doesn't even matter. I don't even need to criticize Amy Peck, but you're aligned to a political party with a guy saying he will do violence, whether he wins or loses, will round up all the migrants, deport them, build giant ass camps. And Governor Abbott, and your party leader statewide, has said, I would shoot migrants, except that the Biden Department of Justice would prosecute me. He said that. So you imagine Ken Paxton is AG under a Trump Justice Department, and it's completely imaginable.
Right.
Donald Trump leads in the polls, or is even, leads in the electoral count. It's completely imaginable. It's complete. Yeah. He's told you he won't accept it. He won't accept the outcome. You have public safety forces in red states that can be taken over by state governments, just like they took over our HISD, or then they have the capacity to overturn. They have the mechanisms to overturn Harris County elections. They can do whatever they want at the state legislature, but the mechanism is in place. So if Ted Cruz loses by 10,000 votes, or Sid Miller, there's a fruit fly infestation that Sid Miller can't handle, and they kick him out of agriculture, and they need 10,000 votes, or we have a competitive sheriff's race. We have a lot of competitive races countywide here. And our sheriff's nominee, Mike Knox, a former council member, he lost a son. His son was a police officer, was a helicopter officer, and died in a crash. And that's terrible. Like, that shit's terrible that someone dies in a helicopter crash. But he is running for sheriff. He, as a Houston City Council member, testified before Paul Betancourt's committee that people were getting water while in line for voting, and testified in Betancourt. Okay, so did he do good constituent service, Mr. Knox? Yeah. Did he sit there at the council table in colleagueship with the Democrats? Yeah. Did he lose a son, and that's terrible, as a police officer? Yeah. Is he aligned with an authoritarian political party trying to be the county's top law enforcement officer? Yeah. And we have to be willing to have these tough conversations.
Right.
And our activist networks are frequently tied with the full political structure of the areas. And the full political structure in Texas is drenched in authoritarianism, white supremacy, and violence, with the threat every day of more of it. And it may seem a little blasé or passé or whatever word I'm looking for when we want to talk. And I'm not saying don't talk about Palestine, don't talk about racial justice, don't talk about trans. It's not either or. I'm just saying this shit's here. It's in front of you. And it's real, and we should talk about it, and we should, as a logic exercise, if we're going to go and use the platform of city council, and I'm asking for this policy, what is the logical consequence? It might go to a committee. Some of you around this table may well be fascists or support fascists. There may well be migrant roundups that are completely disruptive to everything in 7 months. Donald Trump may not accept. And there may be a need to go on the streets. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and this just reinforces everything that we try to talk about within these live streams, why the Texas Grassroots Alliance exists, why we are building these networks and building these relationships, is that grassroots organizers need autonomy. Grassroots organizers need autonomy to be able to challenge the status quo, to be able to challenge the elected officials, to challenge the nonprofit industrial complex, to challenge within our own communities, so that people are aware of what really is at threat and how we can take action together and how we can do work together to build the power we need to fundamentally stop these things. And so this is why we have these shows. This is why we bring organizers on. This is why we're talking about various issues, because we need to have more dialogue around this stuff. And if you want to support grassroots organizers to be able to do this, this is going to be our call for donations that we make every show. Donate to grassroots organizers. We talked about the UT protests last week and reflected on what was happening there. we saw the Twitter traffic go to the hundreds of thousands, to the millions, and various people made calls to grassroots organizers to support them because this is what's needed for us to be able to have this autonomy. And I got to be honest with you, Neil, and I got to be honest with our audience. We are not seeing nearly enough support yet. There are still way too much money going to candidates,
right,
national candidates, statewide candidates, that this election cycle may not spend any adequate money to build local organizing infrastructure. They may not spend a penny, much less anything truly significant,
right,
to help us with local organizing infrastructure that we need to fight local authoritarianism, local corruption. And we're going to be able to do that is by supporting grassroots organizers who are living in these communities and are building relationships and working together throughout the community and throughout the state. And this is where the Texas Grassroots Alliance is working to help build that. So definitely, if you have resources, if you are allocating resources to a candidate, I definitely understand the desire to do that. What we're asking is that you send a portion of that to grassroots organizers, because this year, we are in May. It is only going to get harder the next 6 months to try to address the issues that we need to address, as well as get the turnout that we hope to have, to not have results that are going to make things worse. So support grassroots organizers and continue to stay a part of this work.
So yes, the Houston Democracy Project, HoustonDemocracyProject.com, and grassroots organizers show up. Even the best campaign, plenty of fine people run for office, plenty of clunkers, but even the best campaign does not leave an infrastructure of organizing, of community, of self-protection, of action. They move on, they win, they lose, they're gone. They win, they're in a different world. And maybe they're useful to some degree. But please support grassroots organizers. This shit is real. This stuff is real. And you've seen in Austin the violence. And if you think that is not some other, you may think those are young people. Maybe they're a different race than you. Maybe it's not a cause that animates you. I would really advise not othering with a DPS, the cowards of Uvalde. You see what they show up for and what they don't. And if you think that isn't for you when you're protesting in any part of the state, any Democratic county, votes being thrown out, migrants being arrested in all of our counties. If you think that isn't about you, it's coming for you. It's real shit, and it's right here.
Let's keep these conversations going. We may or may not be with y'all again this week, but we are excited about what's being developed and what's going to be rolling out. So stay tuned. We got some plans. We got some conversations with other organizers getting lined up. And so keep supporting the Texas Grassroots Alliance and the live stream. Share it with your network, and keep supporting local grassroots organizers.
All the shows are on our YouTube, on the Texas Grassroots Alliance Facebook, YouTube, Texas Grassroots Alliance YouTube channel.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Neil. Good seeing you today. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks, everyone, for watching.